Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing good here this morning. Appreciate you all being here. And we look at this title, the Omniscient God, and it might be somewhat overwhelming. Omniscient meaning all-knowing, knowing everything. Even though we probably know some people who are know-it-alls, they are not omniscient. They do not know everything. There are things in which they do not know. So take solace with that the next time you are standing with a know-it-all, and just think to yourself, they don't really know it all. Only God does. God knows, but that can be somewhat intimidating, overwhelming, and maybe in a world that boasts 8.1 billion people in the world right now, maybe we feel like in this God who knows all things, we might feel lost. We might feel not known. We're in a family with a lot of kids, and we were just one of the kids in that big group, and we kind of got lost in the shuffle. Perhaps you work for a big company, and you feel like in this big company you're just a number, and certainly they're going to replace me tomorrow. If I were to leave today or leave tomorrow, I would be easily replaced. And sometimes we might be left maybe in this world as being somewhat feeling insignificant or not known. But Psalm 139 tells a different story. Psalm 139 that we looked at a couple of weeks ago that talks about that God knew David before he was born. It paints a different picture of this all-knowing God that I want to spend some time with. And so go ahead and turn to Psalm 139. Psalm 139 is where we're going to be spending our time for the next few weeks going through. And today we're going to look at Psalm 139, 1 through 6. Psalm 39, 1 through 6. And we're going to break this up into kind of 3 points that are kind of laid out here in 1 through 6. And that is, God sees, God knows, and God cares. God sees, God knows, and God cares. And so we're going to look at this text here, and there's some interesting words here that David uses that we may not realize has some depth to them with just our English wording. Sometimes our English words lack the depth that kind of some of the Greek and the Hebrew words really can give to us. And thankfully, we're able to go and kind of study these words and understand them on a deeper level. So Psalm 139, let's just read that here together in its entirety. It says, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You understand my thought from afar. You scrutinize my path and my lying down, and are intimately acquainted with all my ways. Even before there is a word on my tongue. Behold, O Lord, you know it all. You have enclosed me behind and before, and laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is too high. I cannot attain to it." I was talking to Kevin last week, a couple weeks ago now. Don't worry, Kevin, it's going to be okay. It's nothing bad. Everybody, says the preacher starts setting up a name there. Everybody's like, "Oh no, what is he going to say about me?" Now, we're talking about the eclipse, and his family went down and were there to be able to see the eclipse. And one of the things that I remember Kevin telling me as he looked and saw the eclipse and happening is how small he felt. And I don't think he meant it necessarily in a negative or a positive way. It was just the feeling that he had there in front of the eclipse, and also thinking that God created this. That the eclipse, as amazing as it was, as amazing as it is, there is someone behind it. There is something greater than the eclipse behind it. And so Kevin said, I just felt small looking up the eclipse. And certainly David gives us insight. I love David's heart. I feel like I can identify with David sometimes emotionally on the things that he says. And so I want us to look at what David said and having that in mind. He says in verse 1, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me." In this passage, we're going to see that God knows David's past. He knows his presence. and he knows his future. Right here it says, you have searched me and known me. Past tense. God knows David from the beginning. Later in the passage, as we read, he's going to talk about how you knew me before I was even born. In that secret place, when I came to be, David says, God, you knew me. And so David says, you have searched me and you have known me. And that word there for search is an interesting word that means to dig. And some of the things that I saw, it has been also used with the idea of digging to the root. Digging to the root, almost to find maybe the root problem. You know, with all my health issues, where we're trying to find and dig to the root cause of everything that's going on with me. Well, we're still digging, right? Well, God, if you will, has dug David out. He knows David at his roots, at who he is behind who David may just portray. He knows us behind the image that we give. Some of us may be people who, try to give off something more confidence when we're people who lack confidence. Or maybe some of us might try to come off more humble, who may be a little more proud. But in this thing, I want us also to note, in this passage, we might tend to think in a negative way. God knows everything. Oh, God sees everything. Oh, no. But that's not the intention of David here. It's not meant to be negative. It's meant to be very positive. God knows us at our roots because he has dug down and seen who we are. So then even when we fail, he still knows our hearts. He still knows what we're trying to do. He knows me. We're going to see a positive aspect of this at the end that helps to bookend why this, I believe, is positive. Why David has a positive mindset when he says, you have dug down and you've seen my roots and you know me, God. You know me. This is something that we should be, it should bring warmth to our life. It should be something that should feel good, that God truly knows me. So he says here in verse 1 again, O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You have the past God sees. If you notice, if you look through and you read through this passage on your own later, you'll see the word know or knows or knowledge coming up repeatedly. It is a key word that David uses to express the idea of God's great knowledge of himself, among other things. And so God sees us for who we are. God sees us. And quickly he's going to go to the idea of know. And then in verse 2, God knows. God knows. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. What does this mean here? The idea here is everyday life. Everyday life. He's not talking about the specific times that he goes and sits down for a meal or sits down and talks with somebody, but it is everyday life. He knows David's comings and goings. He knows where he goes and who he talks to. He knows where he does sit down, when he lies down, when he rises up in the morning. He knows when each and every one of us got up this morning. He knows what our plans are and what we're going to do, but he knows our everyday life. What does your everyday life look like? David is excited about that, is happy that God knows his everyday life. You know, we live in a world where I'm probably talking to, as they say, preaching to the choir, right? Where we've got a lot of people who want less government influence, right? We want more independence. We don't want the government looking at us, right? Yet we go out and buy cameras so we can look at everybody else, right? We got cameras on our doors, cameras on our buildings, cameras everywhere, so we can see everybody else, but we don't want anybody to see us. I understand there's some security issues with those things, but we don't want anybody to know about us. You know, if you've been to DIA lately, I went there this last week. I was in San Diego, and they have a whole new security area you go through. And you go through now, and they take your license instead of your ticket there at the beginning. And you'll be in the system if your license there. They're not looking at the ticket. And then they take a picture of you. Like, what? Why do they need to take a picture of me? It's security things. They now know exactly who is coming through. It's not just anybody's ticket that you come in and you scan now. They have a picture of your beautiful face now that they can quickly go to and find out who you are, where you're at, or where you're supposed to be if you're not there. It was not a really big deal to me. It's the age in which we live in. It's what it is, right? It is what it is, even though I hate that saying. But a lot of us, we would be upset about that. Now they know more. Now they know more. Well, God knows it all. God knows it all. What are we worried about our life that the government might find out that God already knows? That God already knows. He knows our way of life. He knows our manner of living. He knows. Continue on here. Look at this next word, this next phrase. He says, when I sit down and when I rise up, you understand my thought from afar. Okay, so here is David is kind of zooming in here on this. Okay, he knows his manner of life. He knows we might be able to watch somebody ourselves and we can kind of pick up on their manner of life. Right? A lot of people, we watch we watch true crime shows where they've got all these videos of these people, and you can tell, and you're like, look, this person looks nervous. This is our guy here. You can tell he looks nervous. He looks like he's got no direction. It looks like he's trying, or he's hiding. You can tell the manner in which they are acting or how they're behaving on that video. Well, we can see that a lot out here in this world, but you know what we can't do? We can't know each other's thoughts from afar. We can't know each other's thoughts from afar. That you can't get any closer to someone than knowing their thoughts. God knows our thoughts. We cannot know each other's thoughts unless we what? We communicate them. Right? Marriage 101. You got to communicate your thoughts in order to have good communication within the marriage and the relationship. Your wants, your needs, the issues that you're having. Also the compliments. Thoughts don't get through with compliments either. Right? You have to express those. But God knows them before they're even there, from afar. So then what does that say about the thoughts that we're carrying as well? Remember, believe God David is saying this in a positive light, in a positive way. But it should make us think about the things in which we think and the words which we are about to speak. Because God already knows them. What are they? Are we taking note of them? Are we careful of them? In verse 3, he says, you scrutinize my path and my lying down. This word scrutinize is really kind of an interesting word that just helps to explain further how much God does truly know you. And this path here is manner of life, your behavior, your conduct. And so God knows your thoughts. Also, God knows your behavior, your manner of life. And it is like the word there for scrutinize has the idea, if you're ever playing cards, playing with a deck of cards, and you're sitting there and you're going to take your cards and you're going to fan them out to see what you have. So you can see the display of your cards. If you have some kings, queens, aces, nines, jacks, whatever it's going to be, you're going to fan them out so that you can see them. Well, that's our lives, our manner of life before God, is it's fanned out like a deck of cards before God. That's how much God can see the things in our life. It's fanned out. There's nothing that's hiding. There's no card that you're trying to hide that God cannot see. And so he sees our lives fanned out before. And I think that goes back because God digs and searches to the root. He knows everything about us. Even the quirks that frustrate our spouses, the little things. But he also knows the good things, the things that make him proud, the things that he longs to see more of in your life. And so you scrutinize my path in my lying down, just my everyday of life, and are intimately acquainted with all my ways. So this word here, intimately acquainted, I think that all of us probably have that one relative that tells us too much information about their surgeries. It's usually an aunt or an uncle. I don't know why it ends up being an aunt or an uncle that tell us about the problems that they're having physically and the surgery that they're going to have, and they are explicit with their details, and it's a kind of a TMI type of situation, right, where they're just telling you everything. You're like, that's great. I didn't really want to know all that. Well, this word here, this intimately acquainted, has the idea of that familial relationship, where in a family where in kind of normal circumstances, those things are just kind of known. You have a relationship with your family where you kind of know everything about each other. Even when you don't think they know about you, they do. Your family knows you better than anyone. They see your manner of life. They know sometimes even your thoughts before you communicate them, right? Because you've been around them so much. They could finish your sentence. They know how you're going to react. Your family knows you really, really, really well. And David is saying, God knows me that well. Among all these other things and how God knows me, he knows me that well. He's intimately acquainted with me and with you. He knows what you're about to say. He knows how you're going to react. He knows what good things that you're going to do. He knows what bad things you're going to do. He knows the good thoughts. He knows the stressful thoughts. He knows the things in which cause you to be anxious, the things in which make you angry, the things that make you happy, the things that bring you joy. God is love. You know, we have the 5 love languages. God is them all. God is them all. He knows intimately you and how to love you as you need. He is a gift giver. He is one that compliments you. He is a God who knows you intimately. Verse 4 is somewhat parallel to what he says in verse 2. He says, even before there is a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it all. You know it all. And there's almost a resignation here, almost a resignation that David is saying, you know my past, you know my present, you know my thoughts from afar. God, you know it all. And I think that there can be great release in that. If we accept the fact that God knows it all, He also knows our future. Are there times where you wish that people just did know more things about you, but you just don't share it? God knows it all. Share it with Him. There is not one page of your life that God has not read and knows intimately and could recite. God knows it all. That's why Paul tells the church in Philippi to give everything to Him. Give all your anxiety. Why? Because He knows it all. He already knows it. So think of it in these terms. When we pray to God, we're not praying to inform Him. We're praying to include him. We're not praying to inform him. Sometimes, maybe we feel like we're just informing God of everything, and we're thinking we're giving him all information that he doesn't already know. It doesn't mean that you can't expel your thoughts, your hearts to him. But when we're praying to him, we want to think with the mindset, too, that we're including him in this. When we pray, we're including God in our life. So he says, even though there is a word on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it all. You know my past, you know my present, you know my future. And yet, and here's where I think it gives us the positive outlook in why I think this is a positive thing, that David is not saying these things because he is scared about what God knows. Even when he says later on the next passage that we're going to look at next week, that wherever I go, you're there. This is not meant to be something that he's trying to run away from God like Jonah was. This is different. And here's why I think that despite all this then, look at verse 5. You have enclosed me behind and before, and laid your hand upon me. In other words, God there, that idea of enclosed, you might have the word hedged or hemmed in, but it is words of protection. God, you know my heart, you know my thoughts, you know my manner of life, and you're choosing to protect me. You're choosing to hedge me in. Your knowledge of me is for my benefit. Have you ever thought that God's knowledge of you benefits you? Because he knows exactly what we need. You ever pray for something or pray for a certain circumstance and God says, how about this one? How about this direction? How about this person? How about this job? How about this city? How about this house? How about this person? And you go, I never even thought about that. That never even occurred. That's not just by happenstance. It's because God knows you intimately on a level that no one else knows. Not even your spouse. Not even your parent. Not even your sibling. And in this next half of this verse here, it says, and laid your hand upon me. This is one of my favorite phrases in this chapter. Oftentimes when you think about the hand of God, it'll have the right hand of God. And oftentimes when that is utilized, it's talking about the power of God. The power of God, the right hand of God, the rule of God. That God will smite the enemies with his right hand. It expresses power. It expresses sometimes military power and just ultimate power. But here, the idea when he's laid his hand on him, he places his hand on David. In one of the most meaningful touches, if you will, in life is when your parent, when you're struggling, when you're going through a difficult time, when your parent places their hand on your back or on your shoulder or puts their arm around you and brings you in. When David says you lay your hand upon me, I think he's expressing the idea of grace. The grace of God. God is placing his hand on David and is giving him grace. He knows him so well. Sometimes, when you are with someone who has lost someone, when you are with someone who is struggling with something, and oftentimes the best words are what? No words at all, but just touch in a recognition of, I know. Have you ever had that expressed to you through a hug or someone's hand on your back or your shoulder, and you know exactly what they're saying without them saying it at all? It's if as they're saying, I know. I know. And we've just gone through everything that God knows. And that's what God is saying to David. I know. I know your enemies. I know Saul. I know who's trying to track you down and kill you. I know. It's the scene that we see with Jesus, with Nathanael. When he comes up, he says, I saw you in the tree, underneath the fig tree. I knew you before you came here. Which expresses the deity of Jesus. And then this last verse, verse 6. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is too high. I cannot attain to it. That word wonderful there can also be translated inexpressible or incomprehensible. What knowledge are we talking about? This knowledge that you have is too incomprehensible. Well, what knowledge does David talked about so far? He's talked about the knowledge of David, of who David is. David knows intimate details of our lives. Some of the things that not even us know. And maybe even some things that we don't want to know or want to get rid of. God is so powerful that he knows all these things, and that knowledge is beyond me. But you know. That's why sometimes the things in which we pray for aren't the things that we always get. It's because he has a higher knowledge of us. He knows our past, our present, and our future. And so he knows a better outcome for us. And knows something that might cause us to struggle, yes, but to grow closer to him. And the amazing thing about this is what this tells us, this omniscient God, okay, leave you with this statement here. When going back to the beginning, when 8.1 billion people that sometimes we may feel lost in, what this tells us, what this passage here in this verse tells us is it's not just that God knows everything, he knows me. That's what David is helping us to understand here in this passage. God knows everything, but don't forget that he knows you. In all the things that he has created, he knows you. And David was comforted by that. That's why David is not afraid of the knowledge that God has of him. Because he knows God has his best interests at heart. And he wants to lead him. And we're going to see that in this chapter a couple of times, the idea of being led. That's ultimately what we'll conclude here in a few weeks at the very end. Read through 139 yourself. I encourage you to read Psalm 139, and you'll already know where I'm kind of going with all of this probably. You'll be able to see it for yourself. See the words that are repeated over and over and over again, and what ultimately David's conclusion is based on the knowledge that he knows God has. And will we have the same conclusion? Will we come to the same conclusion? God knows everything, but He knows you. What will you do with that knowledge? What will you do with those facts, that understanding of how powerful God is and how much He loves you? David teaches us a lot. The Psalms teach us a lot about everyday life, practical application in everyday life, in how we can live this life. And David helps us to understand that more in his relationship to God. Because David is also packed full of sin in his life, just as we have and will in the future. For those that may be struggling with being lost, feeling lost, maybe you're struggling with feeling empty or without a relationship with God, and you want prayers from this congregation, you want encouragement from this congregation, please, for one, go and read this psalm over and over again, but come and ask for prayers from this congregation, from these brothers and sisters in Christ who love you, who want to know what's going on with you. You just have to communicate your thoughts. You know, it is that God may know the very thing in which is causing you struggles or causing you pain, or maybe it is even joy that you have in life that you want to share, and He has someone in here picked out already that will respond the way you need, that will relate the way you need, that will give you a hug the way you need, that will be excited the way you need. He knows your thoughts, but maybe you need to share them with others as well. Please come as together we stand and sing.